The Rebuild SoCal partnership represents more than 2,700 contractors and 90,000 union workers throughout Southern California. The partnership is dedicated to advocating for clean water, safe bridges and roads, which are vital to Southern California's economy. Better and safer infrastructure means good jobs and stronger communities. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and please visit us at rebuildsocal.org to learn much more. Rebuild SoCal Zone. I'm John Switalski, your host for today's episode. Our guest for this week's episode is San Diego County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher. Fletcher is the chair of the San Diego County Board of Supervisors for the past 2 years and currently serves in the county's 4th supervisorial district and chairs the San Diego Metropolitan System's Board of Directors. Supervisor Fletcher is committed to ushering in an era of bold policymaking which aims to transform San Diego County for the better. Fletcher has also served as counterintelligence, human intelligence specialist in the Marine Corps and served 2 combat tours in Iraq and the Horn of Africa. Welcome to the podcast, Supervisor.
John, thank you for having me. You got to call me Nathan, though, please.
Well, Nathan, thank you for being here. Thank you, as we noted in the introduction, thank you for your service to our country, but thank you for your service to San Diego. And we appreciate you being here. So you seem to have, your bio suggests a lifetime of service. And so if you could just give us briefly a little sense of who you are, what has driven you to serve our country and now to serve your community in public office.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's interesting. People say, like, who are you? And I always tell, I'm a dad. My wife and I have 5 kids, and that really defines so much of your life, right? I mean, it is your family. My oldest son is a Marine and Camp Pendleton, and all of our kids are great. We got one in college at a UC Santa Barbara, one working in LA. We got 2 still at home in middle school and high school. But I say that, John, because when I was a kid, all you really want as a parent is you want your kids to be safe and you want them to be secure and you want them to have a shot at a better future. And I think so much of what drives me to serve is that basic commitment to look out for one another, but that basic thing we all have where we want the future to be better than the present. And when I was a kid, San Diego, the Fletcher name is famous. There's Fletcher Hills and Fletcher Parkway and Fletcher Cove, and they were bankers and they owned banks. And I always tell people that's not my Fletcher family. I grew up in a kind of hard scrapping working class environment. My mom was an 18-year-old. She had me. She was not in a very stable situation. We had a rough start to life. And then I moved in 3rd grade to rural Arkansas. My stepdad was a factory worker at International Paper. And, neither of my parents had the chance to go to college. My mom, just a few years ago, as a grandma, went back and graduated college. But they always were like, we're going to work hard and we're going to get by. And it might be tough, but we're going to get by. But you're going to have more opportunity than we did. And that is the essence of the American dream. You can work hard. You can find opportunity. You can have success. And I think that's what drives a lot of what I do, this notion that we serve. And I'll tell you one quick story from the Marine Corps that I think really underpins a lot of what I do. Is a lesson I learned early in the Marine Corps. I was a young, low-ranking Marine, and we have this mountain warfare training center. And I was there for the winter package, cold weather survival school. And we're up in the mountains, and it's freezing cold, and it's been snowing. We haven't had hot food. We're eating MREs, and for days and days and days on end. And then I see this. It looks like a tank Humvee, but it's got snow tracks on it, and it's plowing its way up the mountain. It's coming up the hill. And I said, what in the world is that? And they said, they're bringing us hot chow. And if you're at cold weather survival school at the Mountain Warfare Training Center and you hadn't had a hot meal in a long time, there's nothing on the planet that is more motivating and inspiring. The fact I'm going to have a hot meal. Mm-hmm. And then I saw there was only 1 truck. And I looked at how many of us there was, and I said, there's no way there's enough food. And then they yelled out, they said, get in line to eat by rank. And I thought, well, now I'm screwed for sure, because I'm the lowest ranking Marine. And what I didn't realize until they made me go to the front of the line was that in the Marine Corps, officers eat last. Wow. You take care of those that you're responsible for first. And that really struck with me. And that was something that's a value that we hold in the Marine Corps. And it's a value that I think we used to hold a little more deeply as a society. and that we look out for one another. CEOs need to look out for their workers more than they look out for their shareholders, right? As a society, how do we do that? And so much of what I do when I serve are lessons I learned growing up as a working class kid, watching my mom be a model and inspiration of service as she helped women who'd been victims of domestic violence and experience she had been through, and lessons I learned in the Marine Corps. And so it's an honor every day to get up and fight to try to make opportunity a little bit more accessible, help people get a little bit lower cost of housing, a little bit better wage, a little safer communities, provide a little more opportunity. And so I really appreciate the ability to get up and serve in whatever capacity that is. And I don't really view what I do today as honestly that much different than what I did when I was a Marine. We get up, we look out for one another, we serve, we protect, and we tackle challenges.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's quite fascinating. I hadn't realized that about the Marines. So I appreciate you raising that up here. And it's really a good guiding principle. I mean, just frankly, for anyone to live by, but especially if you're in public service and speaking for myself in public policy advocacy, it's really kind of a good foundation to be on to guide your everyday work. And that's really what Rebuild SoCal Partnership is all about, is really advocating for infrastructure, for the right kind of infrastructure, but for the investments that can have so many benefits, not just to making traffic better or to making sure we have clean drinking water, but providing those societal benefits, a good paying job, that you can raise a family on so that you can raise your kids to have better lives than yourself. So, we're certainly aligned, and I appreciate you sharing not just your story, but just kind of how you view the world. And so I further just want to ask you about how you're thinking through infrastructure and policy more generally, but politically and theoretically. I couldn't help but notice kind of the stark difference between what was happening at the federal level just last week with the rancorous speakers election kind of on one side of the screen. And then on the other, you have a real bipartisan effort around infrastructure with President Biden and the Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell in Kentucky talking about a bridge, talking about investments in fixing existing bridges, about building a new bridge. And that just struck me as pretty significant in that perhaps bridges can build bridges, or
Right.
infrastructure can be kind of an equalizer. And so I'm wondering how you think about that from a policy standpoint, but from a societal standpoint. Are we seeing the rise of the center? Can we use bridges and roads and trains to really tamp down the fringes on both ends of the spectrum?
Well, I mean, look, the fact that the president and the Republican leader of the Senate were standing together at a bridge, they didn't stand together. They could have picked any infrastructure project that was out there, but I think that bridge represents something, right? It is this bridge between so much of what divides us. And if you can get Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden to stand there and shake hands and say this is a good thing, I think that conveys a lot. And I do look. It wasn't lost on me the symbolic nature of what they're doing, but also the substance behind it. In contrast to the just clown show we saw in the House of Representatives. And, at the end of the day, folks that are out there, they just want to know that you're working through the challenges you face on something that's going to be good for them and their family. And so I think you saw on one hand the silliness of politics, the absurdity of it, but on the other hand, you saw what can happen when people come together and do it. And the reality is, Joe Biden and the Congresses in his first 2 years in office have passed more substantive infrastructure funding than at any point before, any point in our
Hmm.
history. And
Hmm.
infrastructure by itself doesn't mean anything. But if you go to a Californian and you say, I've got 1,536 bridges that are in poor condition, well, all of a sudden that
Hmm.
means something. When you tell them that I've got 14,220 miles of highway that are in poor condition, for anyone who's ever had a flat tire on a bad road, that means something.
Hmm.
And so then you tell them, but it's not just about that. It's about the good middle class job that someone can have to go out there and fix that bridge and fix that road. And so infrastructure is more than just a dollar amount into building something that someone may or may not see. It really is the foundation we build. And I talk about this a lot. I'm sitting right now in the County Administration Center, a beautiful building. You and I met here some time back. And,
Mhm.
you look out over the water, and I remind folks that this building, it's a governing center. It's where we come together and the board of supervisors deliberate and discuss, and the public comes down to yell at us about, what they don't like. And all that's a good feature of our democracy. This was built by President Roosevelt. This was
Mhm.
built
Yeah.
in the 1930s, and it wasn't just built so we had a place to be. It was built because there was an urgent need for people to have jobs. And they put
Mhm.
people to work building things that 100 years later are still here and serving the public. And it met a need at the time to put people to work. And the need today is not just to repair and upgrade our infrastructure that's been neglected for decades. The need is for good middle class jobs. We've seen a hollowing out and erosion of the middle class. And these projects that we're doing are not only building the foundation that can last the next 100 years, but they're meeting an urgent and critical need to take folks who, are not going to go get a PhD in something else, but they'll work hard and give them a quality life and a dignity. And so I think we can't ever lose the focus on infrastructure about making it relatable, making it real, but also talking about what it means for families and those workers who are going to go out and do the work.
Yeah, thank you. We know that it means a lot. And, we appreciate your advocacy as a supervisor in general, but you do, as I mentioned in the introduction here, as the head of the MTS, the transit system in San Diego. And so, can you talk about transit generally and the priority that you place on it, but some of the successes and advancements and project completions you've seen in San Diego most recently?
Yeah, I'm really proud of MTS. I mean, we are, I think, a little biased. I'll disclose that as chair of MTS, but I think hands down, we're the best transit agency in America. We carry 300,000 San Diegans a day. We do it safely. We do it on time. And I think we do it better than just about anyone else. Now, we were all impacted by COVID, and we're
Mhm.
all struggling to kind of get back to pre-pandemic ridership. There's been some structural changes in where people move and how they move and how many days a week they go to work. But we're one of the highest percentages of recovering our ridership. But the reality is, we've never truly invested in transit the way that we have other areas of infrastructure. And, we get this all the time. People are like, oh, I saw a bus in the afternoon and it was three quarters empty. And I'm like, well, that freeway is three quarters empty most of the day too. But we still build that because of when it hits peak utilization. Or people will argue and say, well, that trolley should be full cost recovery. The cost of the trolley should pay for the whole cost of the entire system. Except we don't do that. There's no sidewalk fee to walk down a sidewalk. Like, I believe in transit. And if you want to drive your car, we're going to always have a road for you to drive on. But you got a younger generation, John, that wants something different. They want different
Mhm.
opportunities. They want different connections. You got people that are transit dependent. And I really want us to push and lean into this notion that transit connects us. It is what a family can use to go down to Petco Park to a ball game and enjoy an experience and go to a game and then take that transit safely home. It's what a veteran uses to go to the VA to get
Mhm.
their care and treatment. It's what lower income folks may be dependent on because they have no other way to get where they're going. And so we continue to lean into the public debate to get an investment in more transit. I want more buses. I want more dedicated bus lines. And we certainly want more fixed rail. Just last year, we opened the UC Blue Line extension where we actually connected our Blue Line. It's our busiest rail line in San Diego. In the morning on the Blue Line, you can't hardly get on a trolley. They are so full. But because I
Mm.
don't have the funding to grade separate the entirety of it, I can't run them with any more frequency because we disrupt the traffic flow. But you can
Mhm.
now sit from the US Mexico border and go all the way to the University of California, San Diego, and into UTC, one of the biggest booming areas, in a one seat ride, safe, clean, reliable, and on time. And we've seen a tremendous spike in ridership because of that. And we just have to make the same advancement. We need to connect the San Diego airport to our trolley system. I mean, think of
Mhm.
this. If you ever come to San Diego, you fly into a beautiful downtown area, you're right in the center of everything. But when you step out of that terminal, you can't get on a trolley. We need to
Mhm.
connect the trolley system there. We need to finish the purple line. And again, those are a lot of good union jobs that are out doing the work, and it's a lot of opportunities. It's going to lower greenhouse gas emissions. To the extent fewer people, more people take transit. There's a few less cars on the road. It could alleviate your congestion. There's a lot of reasons why we need to get really excited about transit, not the least of which, Sean, is we have a real housing problem down here. We have not built housing at the density and level that we need to over the last 20 years. When you look at the number of jobs we've had in San Diego, we haven't added housing. The market's through the roof, contributing to homelessness. Well, right along transit corridors and lines is the best possible place that you can put housing. And we're doing
Mhm.
at MTS, we got 1,500 units of housing on the way on MTS owned land adjacent to our trolley stops and bus stops, but we need more. And so, we're pushing and we're excited about the federal funding, and we're going to go fight for every dollar that we can. And we're going to continue to make sure we have local funding to really build out our transit system.
Yeah, I appreciate that the vision in that. It's something that we focus on a lot regionally. But what we come across, as you rightfully mentioned, is that housing permeates every transportation policy, every transportation project. And frankly, I mean, it permeates every public policy in the state of California because it's such a challenge. And so I
Mhm.
want to dig into that a bit. And, what I didn't mention in the introduction is you have previously served as a policymaker at the state level. And so, how do you see that balance of where the solutions need to come from locally, either at a municipal level, regional level, or to what extent do they need to come from Sacramento? And I'll just add into that, we talk about NIMBYism, but we also have some permitting issues and EIR issues and other types of issues. There's so many challenges to this. Could you just talk about how you're thinking about housing affordability, housing production,
Yeah.
please?
Well, so much, John, of what Sacramento's had to do has been because local governments have failed to do their job. Local
Mhm.
governments control land use and zoning. And, in many regards, they've been held captive to, the NIMBY voices that will oppose anything that you're trying to do.
Mhm.
And look, I get it. Whatever you're doing has got to match the topography and architecture and density of the surrounding areas. But when you have a piece of land in an urban setting along a transit corridor in a high density area, you need to build high density housing. And folks are going to oppose no matter what you do. And we just had too many local governments that I think were frozen. They were unable to confront the reality of the challenge in front of them, and they didn't have the courage to move forward. And so the state has come in and passed a number of policies, builders remedy, a whole series of other things to put the pressure on local governments. The state is moving to try and hold folks accountable for their RENA number, to have a
Mhm.
housing element plan in place and to hit those numbers and goals. And I think all of those are good. We need more pressure to do it. But on the flip side, we also have to continue to make it easier and faster when housing's in the area where it needs to go. And this is a big fight we've had in San Diego. The days of going out in the backcountry and sprawl development without any connection to transportation or transit and high fire areas, like those days are behind us. It really is into urban infill. And when we get there, it is incredibly frustrating to me when it's zoned properly, it's the right place for it, we have the support for it, the amount of time it takes to get through all of the things. And we've got to figure out how, even when it comes to building rail, you go compare us to other countries around the world that in an environmentally responsible way build the same rail line for the literally the same car at a much lower cost. And we've got to figure out how in California we can expedite the time to completion, and we can expedite because that's a tremendous cost savings. The faster you
Mhm.
can get it built, it lessens the total amount of cost that you go, and it more meets the need fast. So I think a lot of what Sacramento is doing has been really good in terms of putting pressure on locals to build housing quicker. But I think we got to continue to look, particularly with some of these larger infrastructure projects, at how we can speed up the time it takes to get to completion. Does it really need to take us 18 years to do a rail line extension, or could we do it in 8 years, or heaven
Mhm.
forbid, 6 years?
Mhm.
And so I think we have to continue to push on all of those fronts because ultimately the public's expecting us to get it done. I mean, they want to get it done, and it'd be nice to be able to have some of these projects where we knew we could get it done in our lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, efficiency is critical. I mean, just back to the notion of having our children and grandchildren having a better future. If you look at that from GHG or housing affordability or just efficiency in commuting, getting these things done faster and not taking half a generation or in the case of high speed rail, a full generation, if not two.
I mean, like, it's incredible. I can go to countries all over the world. I've traveled all over the world, and they have a high speed rail line, and it works.
Hmm.
You go to China, you go throughout Europe, you go to any of these places. Like, this is not, John, this is not like man on the moon. When we put a man on the moon, we did something as a country no one had ever done before. It
Hmm.
was hard. building a high-speed rail line, we know how to do it. How do we get out of our way so that we can actually figure out how we get it done? And so I get it when people are frustrated. Like, I share that frustration. How can it take us so long to do something that makes so much sense that will benefit so many people? And so I think we got to continue to push to figure out how we can make this process work better.
Agreed. Supervisor, I want to push on the notion about infill for just ever so slightly and just for a moment. The question I have is infill alone enough to meet RENA or regional housing needs assessment numbers, basically the mandated number of units that need to be in any given jurisdiction? And I'll just qualify that question by saying some of the frustrations that we have as advocates is that we feel that sometimes Sacramento views the entire state as a one size fits all. It's cliched, right? But the power lies in LA, lies in the advocacy that comes out of the Bay Area. And I'm wondering if San Diego perhaps feels like sometimes, we just can't do what Sacramento wants. And then if you can, does that infill solution get you all the way there?
Yeah, I think your first point is spot on. Well, one, San Diego in general feels often ignored or forgotten about in the state of California. We are the second largest city, we're the second largest county, and sometimes we feel like maybe we're just a little self conscious down here, or maybe it's because we haven't won a World Series. I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason,
Soon.
sometimes we feel like no one can see south of Los Angeles. Like south of Los Angeles, it's just like the Columbus world is flat. We fall off the end of the world and don't exist. So, we're always fighting to make sure folks remember us down here. But I think, John, your point is a really important one, which is our state is so incredibly diverse, and it is so different in every region and every section of California. And so, what might work to meet a housing goal in Fresno is going to be different than what it might be in Modoc County, which is going to be different than what it is in San Bernardino, certainly different than LA, and San Diego is going to be different as well. And I think sometimes there's a lack of acknowledgement or kind of recognition of how different that is. So in San Diego, we don't have huge undeveloped areas that are ripe for development where you're going to do 3,000 4,000 homes, single family home, all kind of spread out. We've got fire issues, we've got water issues. And so, in a lot of what we're going to do in San Diego, we are going to do some really large, dense infill projects. And a lot of what we're going to do is going to be really creative. We're really pushing on the VMT efficient areas. We're really pushing on the infill areas adjacent to them. And we're literally doing parcel by parcel analysis to figure out how can we make the packaging of a number of smaller projects more attractive. We're doing a lot of creative work where we take government owned land. When you actually make governments do an inventory of land that they own and where it is, you'd be shocked at how much of it's out there. And you'd be shocked at how many governing bodies are completely oblivious to the land it is that they own. Well, if the biggest cost to construction of housing is acquisition of the land and the entitlement process, and government owns the land, well, all of a sudden you can start making affordable housing projects pencil and get done much quicker. We're doing an effort here at the county. We've got 1,000 units of housing in the pipeline on county-owned land, often in another jurisdiction. But we just partnered with the city of San Diego to do an analysis with the goal of building 10,000 units of affordable housing on government-owned land on multiple plots of land, but trying to do them simultaneously, kind of under a master agreement. So I think if you're willing to get creative, if you're willing to look at what's out there, if you're willing to say, hey, we're not going to do this all in one place and we're going to have to do it, you can, but it certainly takes a will and a desire to get it done. And that I think is so much of the frustration is people just don't see things getting done and they're not seeing progress. And so that's what we're trying to do down here. But I think your original question is spot on, and we have to continue to advocate to make sure there's the flexibility in what comes out of Sacramento that allows locals. I always like if you say, look, here's the goal, here's a series of tools, here's a carrot, here's a stick, here's some incentives, and then let us figure out how it is we can do. You know.
No, thank you for that. I appreciate the depth there. Supervisor Nathan, I just want to move on to the final topic here, which is, I think, so front and center as we talk here in the second week of January, and that's water.
Mhm.
We have some very serious storms that have occurred. We have some more rain on the way. And I'm wondering how you're thinking about that in the context of storm water and here and now, but also, into the future. It will be no secret to our listeners that, the vast majority of the storm water goes right back into the ocean at a time that we have a never ending drought that, we're pulling less from the Colorado River and Lake Mead and the other reservoirs are in trouble, to say the least. Can you talk to our listeners through how you're thinking about water? Well, water is a long-term challenge. So maybe if you can just start from that vantage point, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, water politics and the politics of water are fascinating. I mean, Mark Twain had a great line. He said, "Whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting over."
Hmm.
But the
Hmm.
reality is, you fight over it when you have a scarcity. And when you tell folks that the vast majority of the rain and snow that falls in the state of California flows right out into the ocean, it's perplexing. Why would we let that happen when we have a shortage of water? And water is one of the, biggest limiting factors to our ability to meet the needs today. And then the second thing in San Diego, it's a quality of life issue. My kids just accept as the way it is in life that after it rains, you can't go surfing.
Right.
But
Right.
it
Right.
doesn't have to be that way. It's not that way in
Mhm.
Hawaii. It's not that way in other places. But yet we let the water accumulate all of this pollution, and then we flow it right into our beaches, and then you can't go swim because the water's too polluted. I mean, think about the insanity of someone who's sitting there like, we have a shortage of something and we don't capture it. And then we have a thing that we really enjoy and we intentionally pollute it after it rains. I mean, it's
Yeah.
preposterous when you think about it because we've never invested in the infrastructure and we've just never been honest with the public. Look, at a certain point, John, you got to pay for clean water.
Yeah.
Clean water is important. Clean beaches are important. Clean bays are important. But you got to go out and you've got to be able to make the case to say, look, we've got to invest in treating our water and stormwater runoff because it is an important, critical component of our quality of life. But it's also, are we being good stewards of the resources we have? And so we're fighting through with all the local governments, the various issues around 218 and what is a fee, what is a tax, how can we get the sustainable funding we need to build out the stormwater infrastructure. We all know that we're dealing in violations of what you're required to do, and we're doing the best we can to put the revenue together to build that out. And we're going to continue to try and find local sustainable funding sources for it, and we're going to continue to look to the federal government for whatever help we can get there. But this is an issue that we've got to turn the tide, and it's something that people just kind of tend to take for granted. And we've got to make that investment. And I think sometimes, John, in San Diego, we're even more guilty of this than other places. In San Diego, the Navy built out a huge chunk of the infrastructure in the lead up to the war. Some of the big growth periods in San
Hmm.
Diego history was federally funded. We were fighting world wars and the Navy was
Hmm.
expanding. And so they invested in our infrastructure. We remain largely a federally funded economy. The largest driver of our economy here is the Navy and Marine Corps and Department of Defense. And it's just sometimes created a culture where sometimes we don't think we need to pay for the things that we ought to be investing in for our future and our kids' future. The other thing is we got to start thinking a little bit differently about how we build and how we design. There's things around Green Street master plans in terms of how you put in place parking lots and how you put in place sidewalks and how you do these things. I mean, the crazy thing is, when God designed our planet, he built a pretty good way to capture stormwater. It will
Right.
naturally it will naturally
Yeah.
work its way down. It will replenish underground aquifers. It will be water that we can draw up. But we went about just paving over everything, creating these
Hmm.
channels, water floods over. And so we've really been pushing on reimagining, how we build, how we design, where we go, moving to native landscape, reducing the demand a little bit more. But at the end of the day, we've got a probably 100-year backlog of not investing in stormwater infrastructure. We got to fix that. And we got to think about all the folks that are going to have good jobs out there building a better future and hope that one day my grandkids, the day after it rains, are running down to the beach to see who's going to catch the first wave because it's not polluted.
Yeah, that's a great North Star. That's a great picture. Well, Our organization, Rebuild SoCal Partnership, is really keying in on water as something we really want to be active around in San Diego. It's so critical and so underinvested in it, as you said. And so we appreciate your thoughtfulness, not just on this topic, but on all the topics that we talked about today. Appreciate your leadership, appreciate your service to your communities, and appreciate your time here today, and look forward to working with you in the months and years ahead.
Awesome. I appreciate the chance to join you and look forward to seeing you down here soon sometime, John.
Supervisor Fletcher, thank you again, sir. And that's it for this week's episode. We appreciate you listening, and make sure to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Take care. The Rebuild SoCal Partnership represents more than 2,700 contractors and 90,000 union workers throughout Southern California. The partnership is dedicated to advocating for clean water, safe bridges and roads, which are vital to Southern California's economy. Better and safer infrastructure means good jobs and stronger communities. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and please visit us at rebuildsocal.org to learn much more.